Today, I would like to discuss with you the question of what is art and why it is actually this question which is the answer. Now, on this channel, we of course talk about written forms of art. We talk about writing novels, we talk about writing short stories. So in this video, I will focus on writing and everything that comes from that. But in general, what I will say does actually apply to all forms of art. Now let's think about our first answers to the question of what is art, written forms of art, and you can think of several examples. You probably have in your mind certain books you read that had an impact on you. For me, Lord of the Rings had an impact. You can find several examples. What is this specific example of art? One could say that, well, it's the book that I'm holding in my hand right now. It's a fantasy novel. It's a novel written by J.R.R. Tolkien. It's one of the greatest books of history. I think all of these terms certainly apply to or can apply to a specific example of art. But do these answers actually bring us closer to what art is, what Lord of the Rings is? I don't think so. And for this video, what I ask you to do is actually looking at what something is from a very strict perspective. In yesterday's video, we breached the topic of concept of fear. We've learned that what we fear is actually not the same thing as that fear realizing itself at some point in time. If I sit down to write, I can be fearful about my potential success as an author, but it's entirely different from that realization that you fear that at some point will come when you realize that you weren't successful in your writing. So the initial fear and that realization that happens at some point in time are two entirely different things. Now, what is writing? What is Lord of the Rings? It's not a collection or a description of that novel which you can find on Wikipedia, right? There's something more to it. You probably remember the time when you first read that book, when you saw the movies, or any other situation where you came in contact with the story that was created by an author. All of the words that you will find on Wikipedia do not really describe what Lord of the Rings actually is. It could just be a matter of that Wikipedia article not being detailed enough. Instead of providing a summary, you could write down the words of that specific novel. Maybe write down the first chapter, write down the second chapter, the first part, the second part, the third part. What you would end up with is an exact copy of that novel. Looking from the outside, would that Wikipedia article actually be the story Lord of the Rings? I think the answer is no. There's still something more to what we feel when we think about that specific story. It is the experience that you had while you first read that story. When you first read it the second time, the third time. While saying that, what you will probably notice is that your point of view on that specific story might have changed. Maybe the second time around you noticed other things that you haven't noticed the first time. And I think if you read it for 20 times, 30 times, you will always notice something different. The story would be different. What then is art? What is a story? Maybe you have a copy of Lord of the Rings on your shelf. Pick up the book and open the first page. Start to read it. Start to experience the world that opens up in front of you. Now compare that to our previous statement, to the description on Wikipedia, to the claim that Lord of the Rings is a book by J.R.R. Tolkien. Although the latter descriptions are right, the moment that you actually experiencing the story is actually closer to the phenomenon of what this art, what Lord of the Rings is. It is the experience, the question of what will our experience next, what will happen on the next page. All of these questions that open up while experiencing the story, all of that is part of the artwork. All of the words open up different concepts in your head. Every time a new concept is introduced, your brain tries to process it, imagines these concepts, and tries to associate different feelings with that specific thing you are imagining. But is the story really just a collection of that imagination? Would we now have the answer to the question, what is art, in just the collection of the experience you have while looking at an artwork? No. Because we are not trying to find a definition here. Because it's actually an experience. You can't define what art is without experiencing it. As soon as you define it, you are removed from actually finding the correct answer. And the correct answer is asking. The correct answer is reading the story and asking the question what it really is that you think about this story. If you follow this line of thinking, then you will notice that the question of what is art is very much subjective. Everyone has separate associations with certain things that come up in a novel. Everyone has a separate perspective. And what we also learned is that you yourself have a different perspective depending on the moment in your life you read that story. So if you're trying to answer the question of what a specific piece of art is, you would only find the answer in experiencing that work of art and asking the question what it shows you, what it reveals to you. What you probably ask yourself is, how can I actually use this in my writing? What is my job as an author then, if there is not a single answer how I can describe my book? I mean, that's very much the argument against plotting, because every time you try to plot your story you have in your head, every time you do that, you would provide an answer to what you think this story should be like, what you think this story is. But again, you can't know what this story is by not experiencing it. How should I experience something that isn't even done yet, that I haven't fully imagined? What you do as a writer is, although maybe you plotted down the ideas, you still need to put them into practice. You still need to put them down on the page, connect the ideas together, and thereby creating something that reveals some part of the reality of your story. And by revealing these aspects of your story, others can experience the answer you give when they ask what your story really is. So in a sense, the writer has the same perspective as the reader. The author themselves needs to ask the question of, what do the elements of my story show me? What do they reveal? You have a collection of characters. You put them in a specific scenario, in a certain setting. And then you let them express themselves and thereby create a view on this specific world that reveals itself to you and reveals itself to the reader. it's not fully clear to me what you should do as an author to actually write a great novel then, because it's very much up to the specific reader. There are specific examples of great artworks. We all agree that there are great books out there. There are great paintings, great architecture, and that most people, if you would ask them, think the same. So there must be something that is this great work of art. Or is it maybe only the concept of a great artwork that you are attaching to that specific artwork? Is it really just a concept that confuses us? Shouldn't we maybe ask us the question whether we actually see it as a great form of art and questioning the term, the concept, and going back to experiencing that specific artwork and answering the question with the fact in mind that while you are experiencing the answer to what the quality of that specific artwork is, that this may change, that this might be different for everyone, that the only real answer we can give ourselves is the experience of that specific work of art. We can only ask the question of what a great artwork is. Every time we're trying to provide an answer to that question, we are wrong. The very interesting part about that thought is that there's other things in life that we actually ask about. The meaning of life, for example. How would you answer this question? And with this question, I'll conclude for today. Feel free to write in the comments what the answer to this question is for you. What is art for you? What are specific examples of great works of art? Do you agree that Lord of the Rings is a great artwork? Thank you for listening and see you in the next video.